This is the Storypunks podcast, the show where we talk about all the punks, so steampunk, dieselpunk, cyberpunk, and all the other punks. And this is the finale of season 1, so I'm so thrilled to be continuing the conversation with Jim Butcher, steampunk author, among many other wonderful series you may know Jim for. And I know we had a wonderful discussion last time, and I'm so excited to conclude both the season and this interview in particular. So, very excited about that. Audible is sponsoring this episode of the Storypunks podcast, so you can find my running list of all the punk-related reads or listens specifically that I recommend. And so Jim Butcher's Aeronauts Windlass is definitely on this list. It is super fun, and it's read by a very accomplished actor, Ewan Morton. So please go check that out. It's at storypunks.world/audible. Let me just update you on where season 1 is leaving me as far as my projects. So I'm going through kind of a metamorphosis here. I've had some hiccups, and a lot of it has come down to changing my working space. So I was working in one place where there was going to be an instruction for about a month, and that just wasn't going to fly. I just do way too much recording, and I mean, it was like something out of War of the Worlds. It was like, but like in louder and repetitive. Even with my windows closed, I was able to capture audio that was just like that, but insanely repetitive, and it just, yeah. And they started at 7:30 a.m. They went to 6 p.m. Like, there were no working hours that were even, anyway, we worked it out. Like, they were very gracious about letting me relocate. So it's all good, but it's been tricky. And then I've had some hiccups that weren't even related to this, but it was just like a perfect storm. So as I was getting ready to release the pre-order for Hives of the Halcyon, so that is my Salt Sheen Paradox series, Decapunk time travel thriller, people have asked me if I could please not release this book. And so I'm talking to some sponsors. So I'm just trying some different things when it comes to how I want to promote this book series, and I reached out to some people, and so now I'm having some really interesting discussions. It will just make the series stronger, it'll be better, but I know that that does cause a hiccup because some people ordered the pre-order. The only option Amazon gave me was to just cancel the pre-order rather than, put it out in the future or anything like that. So working within those parameters, that's what I had to do. And so what it means is I am going to offer it for free when I do roll it out. And that's just because I know that this is a hiccup, and I want to extend that to anyone who signed up. So originally it was for a discount, but I'm going to go ahead and offer it for free. And so if you had signed up for the pre-order, you probably saw this in your email, but just in case you're wondering why it didn't just pop up at the time, it's because I had to just completely cancel it because I'm kind of on hold because of this situation. So that's what happened there. And it's really, they refunded your money, so it's all okay and it's all going to work out. But there wasn't more flexibility than that. I'm super excited about where this is hopefully going, but it does mean there's a bit of a delay if you signed up for the pre-order. So if you're listening to this right when I release it, or if you're listening to it quite a bit later, just know that you can always go to my website to see the status. So that is cindygrigg.com, CINDYGRIGG.com. Again, I'm just so excited for everyone who has signed up for the pre-order and been interested. It will just be a little bit longer. So if you are interested in knowing when that drops, then please go to cindygrigg.com, CINDYGRIGG.com. And that's where you can see the status for any of this, because you may not be listening to this as I release it, but that's where you can find that series no matter when you listen to this. Very excited for that. My other series also, I'm just plugging away on that. So that is Peacock Levine and the Ethereal Fates of Not. And I will be posting when that is rolling out on that same page. So it all happens at cindygrigg.com, CINDYGRIGG.com. And it's really similar when it comes to my dictation stuff. I had some really fun beginning sessions and, just rolling out my first beta version of my dictation courses. And I will be continuing to refine those and then rolling those out as soon as possible. So this is kind of how it is when we're getting stuff off the ground and trying new things. And I'm so appreciative to everyone who's helped this show grow through season 1. Thank you for your patience with all of it. And I am going to be interviewing people in the gap between season 1 and season 2, the way that you can know who's coming on. And so you can hopefully send me an audio question or just a typed question that I will read for you, and ask someone that I'm interviewing the question you want to know. The way you're going to know about that is to sign up for my newsletter. So go to storypunks.world/newsletter. Okay, so you know the state of things, the state of the show, the state of everything I'm working on. What do you say we get into the conclusion of this discussion with Jim Butcher? I'm so excited to share it with you. And I know if you have a project in mind that you've been working on or just wanting to get started with, keep that in mind as you listen, because Jim has a lot of great energy and great advice when it comes to all this stuff. So here we go.
Uh-huh.
I really enjoyed looking at the maps that you've had done or that you've partnered up to have created. And so when I looked at those maps, it really made me wonder, what was the process of having those made? They're just beautiful, and anybody can go to his site and see it. I don't know if you were involved, but
This was the process. Was I got to the end? I was getting to the end of the Codex Alera series, and a friend of mine wrote and said, "Jim," I said, "What?" He says, "You're writing epic fantasy, but there's no map." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're right. There's no map. That's wrong. That's just wrong. That is against the rules." So I said, "I got to have a map." But I was like on the last chapter of the book, and kind of writing the wrap up, and I'm like, "Oh, what am I going to do?" And so I turned to one of my beta readers, who has been my very good friend, Priscilla Spencer, who has been a Dresden Files fan and beta reader for the longest time. I think we've been friends for about 10 years now. It's weird. But anyway, I turned to her and said, "Priscilla, you're an artist, right?" She's like, "Well, yeah, I mean, I do art." I'm like, "I need a map. Can you do it?" She's like, I guess I can. And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to pay you this much money." And she's like, "You can't pay me that much money for that." I'm like, "This is a piece of art that's going to be in a New York Times bestselling novel. If I don't pay this, people are going to think I'm taking advantage of you." She's like, "Okay, well, I guess you can pay me that now." But then she put the map together of Alera, and I was like, "That was fantastic," and it looked great, and we loved it. And there were all somebody actually carved it into took her map and then carved it into a piece of wood and made it this 3D map, and gave it to me. It's hanging up on my wall at home. It's awesome. And she was like, "You know what? I wonder if people would enjoy having copies of this." And so she got copies printed up, and sure enough, people loved them. And when the Steampunk one came along, I said, "Okay, let's do that. Let's do another map." And she'd done several for other authors at this point. And she was like, "Great, fantastic." And so we started designing the ship, what the airships looked like. And the airship designs are actually based off of submarine designs. Because they kind of got the same, a lot of the same considerations. Submarines are as close as we can get to what airships would be like, maneuvering them and fighting them would be like in the real world. So there's a lot of submariners who are fans of the book, because they're like, nobody else gets to do ship-based 3D combat except us. That's awesome. We love reading this book. I've had a great time working on that, and that was just turning to my friend and saying, "We need this," and then we put together the designs for the airship and what the Havels would look like for the Cinder Spires. And then she's like, she says, "I really wish these could be done in copper." And she was just mentioning that to her printer, and her printer's like, "Well, actually, we can." And she's like, "You got to be kidding me! What would it look like?" And the printer's like, "I don't know." So they printed out a test copy. And it just came out this beautiful, copper on dark blue background, and it looks like a piece of art. It doesn't really look like a useful map, it's gorgeous, and that came out by accident as well. And she was like, "I'm going to need this many hundred of them." And the printer's like, "Nobody prints that many," and so they had to run out and get more paper and so on, and have that brought in, and until they finally got that done. And it's been this, and I keep running into other awesome nerds who want to do something cool and fun with my stuff, and I'll be like, yeah, that'd be great. Let's do that. And so Pat Rothfuss wants to help raise money for world builders, and he says, hey Jim, can we use some of your stuff for some T-shirts for the sale? Yeah, absolutely, do that. My friend Fred from college, who was a gaming buddy of mine in college, Fred Hicks, he owns Evil Hat. He helped design Fate. Their award-winning role-playing system. They designed the Dresden Files books, which won all kinds. The Dresden Files role-playing game, which won all kinds of awards. And they are just going gangbusters on that. And I've hardly done anything. Basically, Fred was like, "Hey, can we make a Dresden Files game?" And I'd be like, "Fred, I would trust no one more than you to make this game. Go right ahead." And that took about 7 years. It turned out he came back to me and said, we're going to have to build like 3 other games before my company is big enough to build your game. And so I just wanted to let you know we haven't given up, but we've got to do this other stuff to build the company up. I'm like, oh, okay, well, can I help? So I did some reading and feedback for some of their stuff. He got to show me all the stuff they were designing while they were doing the Pulp, their Don't Rest Your Head series, and then the Pulp Fiction gaming system they did. And then you run into art, and then there's artists and graphic novel artists and so on that I've gotten to work with, and there's all these cool stuff that happen, and people are like, Jim, it's amazing that you planned all this, and I'll be like, yes, I planned it. This has been a mastermind the entire time.
Yes.
When actually all I'm doing is like goofing around, but it's working out.
But you're in contact with all these cool people and you're open to it. I think that's really cool.
Well, you kind of got to be. I mean, especially if you're going to take your stuff somewhere else, you got to understand that while that work might be your baby, if you're going to do a TV show, your baby's going to boarding school and you're not going to be able to control everything that happens, but it is good to be able to sit down and talk with the people who are actually working on the show and to just kind of vibe with them. I had no contractual authority to do anything on the show, but I got along with the guy who was actually doing all the work, Robert Wolf. It turned, I got to sit down with him and it turns out that we're both D&D nerds who have run Roman Empire campaigns. And, I got to sit down with him and say, hey, when you were writing DS9, were you basing the Dominion off the Roman Empire? Because it really seemed like you had like the shapeshifters were the Roman citizens and the Vorta were their Greek advisors. And then all their warriors were their legionnaires. And he's like, oh my gosh, that was exactly what I was doing. And we must have geeked out about that for 2 hours at a little sushi place in Toronto. It was great.
You've been staggering so many different projects. I can't even imagine. Yeah,
I mean, and I'm going to have to come up with a new comic book pretty quick here. Oh my gosh, I haven't come back to him yet. I need to do that. But I've got to work on the next graphic novel, which is going to be a lot of fun. And then I want to make enough time to be able to actually write a graphic novel down the line, because the way we've been doing it is I'll just do like an outline and then I'll work on the script along with Mark Powers, who actually writes the script. And I'll go back through and suggest things if I think things can be improved or changed. At this point, I don't have to do a whole lot because we've been working together so long. But I want to write the next one because they want to do a Harry Dresden, Vampirella, Red Sonja crossover graphic novel.
Ooh.
Right? That would be so cool. That would be so much fun. Poor Harry. He's just because he's got issues with vampires, and there's no way he can defeat Red Sonja without cheating, because he's a wizard. That's basically his whole life is cheating and fight. So he's not going to get any action this entire time. Poor guy. But that sort of fits with him. He's kind of the Charlie Brown of urban fantasy. So it doesn't matter what happens. At the end of the day, Harry's going to look down and go, "I got a rock." That's kind of his life. That's
kind of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a couple questions from Twitter.
Cool.
So let me read these for you. The first one is from Zachary Proctor.
Hi, Zach.
Z Proctor 13. And he asks, how difficult is it to incorporate the actual physics of our world into magical or otherwise non-realistic worlds of your books?
Not only is it not difficult, it is very, very necessary. And it really, I think it adds a lot because it forces me to be creative in order to kind of make things line up. I don't have to actually make something work. I just have to make it kind of look like it should work and talk fast enough. And if I do it right, you'll believe me and we'll go along with the story and have a good time. But for the Dresden Files, for example, I based a bunch of the magic on Sir Isaac Newton's laws of physics. And I would just grab those and say, yeah, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Matter can neither be created nor destroyed. And you take a bunch of anything that's in motion tends to stay in motion. And you kind of work in laws of entropy and other stuff like that. And so just say, I'm just going to take all this stuff and apply it to magic, because this stuff makes it sound really credible. I mean, the physics of the universe is about as credible as it gets. And if you can take something like that and you couple it up with something completely fantastic like magic, it makes it more, it gives it more verisimilitude. It makes it more believable. It makes it easier for people to go, okay, I'll buy it. Magic. Let's tell me a story, dumb wizard story, man. Let's see what you can do. And I kind of stumbled on that on accident, and I didn't understand why it worked so well until years later. And I just kind of look back at like the 25-year-old me who started working on this and go, oh my God, kid, you knew nothing at all. You did a bunch of this stuff on accident, but God, were you lucky? So it was sort of for a lot of the choices that I made back then. I mean, in retrospect, they were like super smart choices, but I didn't know it at the time. I was just like, oh, we'll do that. That sounds good. And then just sort of, over time, it's worked out pretty well. But I think a lot of my writing strategy has been that started with, okay, I've got to make magic somehow work in parallel with physics so that it seems more believable. And then after that, it was like, okay, well, after I've done that, well, I've got to make my world work with vampires so it seems more believable. Well, how do I do that? Oh, well, all right. Let's just assume that vampires are something that human beings have encountered occasionally over time, and lots of times they don't survive the encounter. And when they do, it was dark and scary and very blurry. So they've got kind of this really vague idea of what vampires are. And it turns out they've been seeing multiple different species of vampires this whole time. But they're like the blind men with the elephant, where, one blind man feels the elephant and says the elephant's like a wall, and the other one feels the elephant's ear and says the elephant's like a fan, and the other one feels the elephant's tail and says the elephant's like a snake. And they're all right and they're all wrong. And that's what the general idea of vampires is. And so I said, okay, we're going to take vampires and break them out into their elements. And that's where my vampire reports came from. And then the same thing happened with werewolves. And then after that, it happened with ghosts. And after that, it happened with fairies. And every time I had to figure out, how am I going to incorporate this into this world that is based on, that is sort of grounded on Isaac Newton. And that kind of, the flexibility that forced on me, I think, has served me really well over time, because I can look back at some little off thing that I wrote in one of the earlier books that I wrote purely on instinct, and I've got no idea why I put it in there, and look at something and go, oh, you know what? I can totally fit this into the story later, because that adaptivity had to become part of my creative process. And it happened on accident. I wish I could say I was smart enough to have planned it. I didn't, but it's worked out pretty well.
I really like that you talked about instinct as well as luck, because I think it's really cool that you very likely absorbed so much of this stuff, even if you weren't consciously thinking of it. And it's really obvious that you followed your heart. And I think that's all instinctual. So
that's true. I've always thought that when you're writing, that you've always got to have this balance of the drive of the cold, rational, professional, mercenary guy as a writer, because you're doing business with business people, and there are people that do depend on you turning things in and getting things done. So you've got to be able to have that. You've got to be able to function. You've got to be able to, when somebody throws criticism at you that drives you insane, you have to be able to set your emotions aside and work it out like a grown up. But at the same time, you've got to do stuff for that little kid that's inside, or else you get bored and just drop things and wander away. You've got to do stuff that you look at and go, what would be awesome? A zombie T-Rex would be awesome right here. And then you get started on that. And you've got to be able to look back at that 10-year-old you who was looking at things going, wow, and be able to still go, wow, about things, and grab the things that make you go, wow, and write them. The things that, when I'm out watching movies and watching stories and reading people's books, and I find the things that make me cry, I'm thrilled about, or the things that make me angry, I'm thrilled about that. It's like, ooh, how did they do that to me? I have to learn so I can steal it, and be able to do that to people as well. And as a writer, it's kind of the danger of being a writer is it gets harder and harder to enjoy those stories, because you've got to find the ones who use tricks that you haven't learned yet. And then once they've learned that, once you figure out what they do, then you can't be fooled by that trick again. But at the same time, you can do your own stuff and make people happy in new and different ways, and that's an awesome thing to do as a writer. That's fun. The science of storytelling, the craft of storytelling, I'm all about that, man. I could talk about that for hours.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, we have a second question from Twitter. This is from James Hartz.
Hi, James.
He is on Twitter at James Hartz, and he asks, what are the different challenges, if any, when telling stories in various genres? So, for example, steampunk versus urban fantasy versus traditional fantasy.
Well, of course, if the further afield you go from like conventional everyday books, the more you narrow your audience down in general. So I would say that, when you go way out into science fiction, way out into fantasy, you're working uphill, definitely, because there's going to be fewer people there to get a look at you. And the whole idea is you want to get to those people who read your stuff and who get it, who, when they're reading your book, they don't even see the words. They start seeing a movie playing inside their head. Because those are the people who are going to go, oh, that was amazing. Or they'll get, when you do something to make them upset, they'll throw the book across the room and then they'll go get it to keep reading. And those are the people who will be up until 4 a.m. when they've got to be to work at 5:30. And they're the people who go out and talk to other people and say, you've got to read this book so that I can geek out about it with you. And so those are the people you want to get. And the more people who are in your base audience, the more of those people you're going to connect with. So it gets harder and harder the further you go out. And that's from like a business perspective. From an art perspective, the further away you get from the normal world, the more work you have to do to establish the strangeness of your alien world. And when I say work, I mean it's just word count. You've got to be able to think. If you're writing in the regular world, you can say, we met at Burger King. And you say, we went down to Burger King and ordered a burger and sat down. And people are going to know what a Burger King looks like. If you're in a fantasy universe, though, and you're going to a fantasy restaurant, you can't just say, we went to a Burger King. There's no point of reference. So you've got to describe that. And it creates all this extra work for you. And if you do too much of that, it slows the pace too much and people don't want to read it. It's one of the reasons fantasy is known as such a generally slow-paced genre, is because you've got to do so much work just to establish the world, and that slows things down in the book. I think movies have the advantage in fantasy because they can create the fantasy world that is just there in the background happening. And it's one of the things I think that made Lord of the Rings so amazing. But I mean, that's a couple of the things you got to worry about. If you're in any particular genre, if you're doing urban fantasy, you've got to be careful not to get too close to the big urban fantasy guys. You can't get too close to Buffy. You can't get too close to Supernatural. I can't get too close to Kevin Hearn and so on. If you're just depending on what you're doing, there's always all these different concerns. If you're doing urban fantasy, you've got to have your own vampires these days. You can't just do generic vampires. Nobody's happy with that anymore. But at the same time, all the people are always saying, "Oh, vampires are over. Urban fantasy." It's like, no, urban fantasy's been going since the Grimm brothers. I think it'll keep rolling for a while more. Everybody's been saying vampires are out since the mid '80s, I think, is when I started hearing it. Vampires are over. And yet we still keep, another Twilight, another Vampire Diaries, another whatever, which was a surprisingly good series, Vampire Diaries. I mean, I went and watched that, and the writing craft on that was very well done. There's a reason it survived as long as it did. So plus, I just loved the Vulcan neck break that they had developed for that. Because in that series, when a vampire wanted to take another vampire out, but kind of politely, like you didn't want to kill him, you just wanted him to not interfere with your plan, you'd break his neck. And that took like 2 or 3 hours to heal up from. And then he could come back and be upset with you, but it would already be done. So, they had the Vulcan neck break in Vampire Chronicles. And, there would just be scenes happening. And then somebody would break somebody else's neck. And they'd be like, okay, now we can get ready for the surprise party, or whatever it was. So.
It is pretty epic.
Yeah.
So this actually leads me to my question about where you see steampunk going. So you've been talking about, the vampire literature and stuff like that, but what about steampunk? I'm assuming you may feel similarly about it, but do you think it's going to be different to write your next book? Will the environment feel different to you as the writer between book 1 and book 2?
No, but to me, it's weird. Genre is something that doesn't as much exist to writers as it does to readers. Writers, you kind of have to be cognizant of it, at least as far as it goes, where you need to be able to sell an editor or a bookseller on, this is the genre of my book, and if you make it too crazy, they're going to be like, I don't know how to sell that, and they're not going to want to buy it. But I don't think it's going to change much. I mean, for me, writing the book is, I think I'm writing a science fiction book. I thought that about Alera as well. I thought it was a science fiction book. And I was told, no, it's definitely fantasy. I'm like, oh, fine, it's fantasy. But I mean, it feels sort of like a science fiction book to me, because I've got all the rules laid out. I know the things that are happening and kind of where I want to go. And it seems very science fiction-y to me. But they'll say, no, it's a steampunk novel. I'll be like, all right, if you say so. But I'll just keep writing it, and the rules as far as getting people involved in characters and their stories and keeping the plots moving and getting folks to care about what's happening, those are all independent of genre. That's the heart of writing, and that doesn't matter what genre you're in. That's the same thing over and over. So as long as I can get people to be like, okay, floating ships and talking cats, tell me a story. Goofy talking cat boy. Then as long as I can do that, then we'll be fine. As far as the genre goes, I think it'll get more popular. It's a lot of fun. People have a good time dressing up at it, or dressing up in it. I think really what sells steampunk more than anything is, at the heart of it, there is this idea of a society that is more civilized, or at least more civil, with greater courtesy, with greater decorum. And I think there's a lot of people who kind of look around at our current society and popular culture and go, oh God, could we have a little decorum? Like, it doesn't have to be a lot, but can the president not be having flame wars on Twitter, please? Can we not be being constantly lectured left and right by various celebrities about whatever cause they happen to have? Can we just have a society that's a little more reserved, a little more? Maybe we could. I think we look back at that and go, that must have been nice sometimes, And I think part of that is part of what fuels steampunk. Is we want to think that in the middle of just a furious row, that a tea party can suddenly break out, and we kind of wish for a world that was like that a lot of times, and I think that's part of the draw of steampunk for people.
I think so too. I really love that answer, because it is. I've sensed that from being on panels and interacting with this community as well. So yeah, that there's value to be had in the decorum of culture, and that. While we have largely thrown away a lot of that in the name of, efficiency and convenience and speed, because we're all about speed in modern culture. Looking back at some of the things that were just considered daily activities and day-to-day things that you had to do, just the amount of time they spent writing alone is just unthinkable. Why text? Is kind of the way we look at it now, and I think. And while there's a lot of good that has come of that, I think that we've lost some things, and that part of steampunk is looking back at those things we've lost and going, oh man, we lost that. You know what? We're not going to lose it. We're going to get dressed up this weekend and have a tea party and a tea duel, and why not? Why not in a society where things are always just moving so fast and nobody has time for anything? Very, very cool. Well, I want to be conscious of your time, but I have one last question, Jim.
Okay.
So you're just one of the nicest authors I've met, and you're very authentic. How have you kept that when you don't feel like it? And especially today when you're not feeling well.
I will give a lot of credit to my son, who never really believed in that his dad was terribly impressive at anything. And so that was a very easy way to stay grounded, because I still remember at one I was doing an interview just like this one, and the kid walked through the room in the background, and they're like, "Oh, is that your son? Do you mind if we ask him a question?" He was about 15, and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" I said, "Hey, kid, come over." And they're like, "Well, do you think it's amazing being the son of this famous author?" And Jay's like, I can't believe any of you people take him seriously. And then he just walks away. It's just like, yeah, that's my life right there. That's my life. But plus, I mean, I spend my weekends running around dressed up in ridiculous costumes, hitting people with Nerf swords for fun. I mean, I can't take that person seriously. I'd never be able to take myself seriously again, you know?
Hey.
But, I mean, and plus you realize that, you know, the stuff that I've been given, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And I try and do as much thinking as I can going into it. But at the same time, a lot of it is, it's a talent that I was given, and that's not my fault. I mean, I hope I've used it well enough. But you know, I wasn't the one who said I will be a mighty author now. I did do a lot of work to get here, but there's also been some good fortune, and there's been you know, I've been lucky. And you got to remember that once you start thinking that I'm the one who did I did all of this, whatever, man, that's how you ruin it. That's how you lose that inside 10-year-old. You got to keep that guy around. I think he keeps you humble.
Oh, absolutely. Jim, thank you so much. Thank you for modeling such a wonderful attitude for us. And thank you for your time. It was just wonderful.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Okay, seriously though, isn't Jim Butcher the coolest? Yes, he is. I just really loved this conversation, and I know many of you were looking forward to it. I know that many of you are hopefully looking forward to season 2. So thank you to everyone who's reached out to me and commented throughout this season and with ideas for the next season. I love growing this community and evolving as the person hosting this show. But I really look forward to and depend on you sharing this with somebody today. So if this season has meant something to you, then will you please go to your iTunes account and just leave a review, because that's how other people you don't even know can hear about it. And then secondly, if you share this with someone you do know, and you can do that through just a text, you email it, you could just mention it in conversation, and I would absolutely appreciate that. It really is like a celebration of all the work that it's taken to get through season 1 and all the wonderful guests who have spent their time talking with me and sharing their expertise when it comes to the punk-related genres. I know everybody appreciates it, so please go to storypunks.world and scroll through the different guests that I have cataloged there, and go to their sites and send them some love, because they really were gracious to share this information with us. So if there's an episode that you particularly loved, you can also share individual episodes through iTunes. It's really easy. You just click on the triple dot and you should see that option. So that's another way to give back to these wonderful guests who have taken so much time, including Jim Butcher. And thank you for helping this show to continue to grow right up into the end of season 1. I just really appreciate that you are part of that, and I really believe in that energy and that it has come back to me, and I feel that. So thank you so much. I hope you know that I will be sending energy to you about your projects as I work on new stuff for season 2. So before I get back to the show, please know that I may send some bonus episodes. So please stay subscribed, and that way you'll know when the show's back. And you can also go to storypunks.world/newsletter to get the lowdown on who I might be interviewing. So I think that about wraps it up. Thank you again for everything, and I look forward to talking with you in the future with season 2. Thank you for being part of the Storypunks podcast thus far.